Hello. Well, I am going to make my usual, I'm going to be talking about the climate emergency, as you'll probably see from the clip by the side here. But first of all, I'm going to say that I am, like everybody else, coming to terms with the death of Her Majesty the Queen, and in many ways am now looking forward to a new chapter in the history of this country. That is the way of things. And it's sort of interesting in this case because not only because just before the Queen died, we had a change of government. Of course, everything's gone into a bit of a freeze now until after the funeral. But it is definitely like a page has turned. And it is also interesting that the Queen died on the 9th of the 9th, which means there will be no mix-up over dates, because in Britain, 9/11 actually means the 9th of November, because we do day, month, year. And I don't know how you Americans got hold of month, day, year, which makes no sense at all as far as I'm concerned, but it does mean that 9/9 will mean something to both us and you guys across the pond. All right, now, having said that, I am giving you a bit of news. I found this article a couple of weeks ago, actually, but I think it is a harbinger of a new attitude to come. You see, when COVID struck, governments right across the world suddenly realised that they could govern by fear in a far more successful way than they had ever done before. And one of the fears was COVID, but the other one, you see, was the climate emergency. The fact we were all going to burn to a crisp, that the polar bears would be dead by 2018, that there'd be no glaciers by 2020, you know, that sort of thing. And of course, there are people no more susceptible to being controlled by fear than children. So obviously, that's hitting the children, and a lot of rather silly parents were going along with this. So, talking about being governed by fear, and there's this climate emergency and fossil fuel stuff and all the rest of it, and then the Ukraine war suddenly stopped us from being able to get cheap oil and gas from Russia. And bit by bit, I confidently expect that people will stop talking about the climate emergency here in the West. Bit by bit, I think the governments are going to ease back on the pedal on that sort of thing, and a couple of articles here are harbingers of that, I think. Now, these are fairly side areas, side publications, but people will start to quote them more. The BBC will start to quote them more. Suddenly the polar bears will be doing fine. As we all know, fracking is now perfectly all right, according to our government of the day, the new Conservative government. All right, so this is Clark County today, and this is the article they wrote. And again, I have to tell you, although I agree with them by and large, I have to point out, because I always do, the dishonesty. Here it says 1,200 scientists, scholars, there is no climate emergency. That looks good. And then down here it says, led by a Nobel Prize laureate, more than 1,100 scientists and scholars have signed a document declaring climate science is based more on personal beliefs and political agendas than sound, rigorous science. Now, I believe that's fine, but you notice that figure, 1,100, more than 1,100, and then up at the top here, 1,200. Now, it's not a big difference, but you see, that gave a better headline. It might be 1,170, so you can round it up perhaps to 1,200. That's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. But here I'm talking about clicks, and you always have to be careful about that stuff. Okay, so the World Climate Declaration states climate science should be less political while climate policies should be more scientific. Well, duh. Okay, all right. Scientists should only address uncertainties and exaggerations in their predictions of global warming, while politicians should dispassionately count the real costs as well as the imagined benefits of their policy measures, the declaration reads. Now, that's the ideal of the world. An ideal of the world where politicians do things according to what makes sense rather than what aggrandizes them. And a world in which scientists, just take a geographer. Nobody listens to geographers. But if a geographer starts thumping the tub about the glaciers disappearing in Switzerland, then the BBC and the Guardian are there quicker than you can shake a microphone at them to get their opinions. So, of course, they are being encouraged to be more extravagant in their claims. There's a book called The Kraken Wakes, a novel, a science fiction novel by John Wyndham. I just remembered it, you see, because I remembered it because of this. There is some sort of extraterrestrial civilization which has taken residence in the depths of our oceans, and what they are doing is they are trying to melt the sea ice in order to lift the sea levels and create a water world which would be more to their taste. A scientist realised what was going on, and he went on some mass media, television or radio, whatever it was, to tell everybody that there was a problem, a climate emergency. But he gave scientific figures because he was an old-fashioned scientist. And the hero heard him on the television or the radio saying the following. And I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was something like this. The sea ice is melting, and if this continues, within a year, sea levels will have risen by 2 inches. And the hero of the story just sort of slapped his head. He knew nobody would listen to the idea of a sea ice raise of, a seawater level raise of 2 inches. That wouldn't float at all with the public. It would have had to have been far more exaggerated. And he knew nobody was going to take any notice of him. Kraken Wakes, John Wyndham, he wrote some good stuff. Okay, we should free ourselves from the naive belief in immature climate models, the WCD states. In future, climate research must give significantly more emphasis to empirical science. In other words, what the scientist sees rather than what some computer predicts. Remember, you know that expression, GIGO, don't you? G-I-G-O. Garbage in, garbage out. And if a scientist programs something in that is there to slant the results in a certain way, then those are the results you're going to get. Now, this is from the Daily Skeptic, and here we have another. Now, you see, these were published a little while ago, on the 1st of September, not too long ago, but I can absolutely guarantee you that the BBC will be quoting this, or whatever source they're quoting, pretty soon. And suddenly fracking is fine, and fossil fuels aren't that bad, properly controlled, which they aren't properly controlled, and so on and so forth. Global warming, that thing's in the way there, isn't it? Global warming, okay, let's start again. Here we go. Global warming paused, polar bears thriving, more coral on the Great Barrier Reef than you can shake a stick at. If you remember, a scientist lost his job in Australia because he said that the coral reefs around Australia were not dying as everybody in Australia was absolutely convinced was happening. It's been a difficult gig for climate alarmists of late. So, okay, people are realising that there aren't any mass deaths of polar bears, and global warming isn't as runaway as they said it would. But, it says here in the Daily Skeptic, there is always the melting Arctic ice and the prospect of the Greenland ice sheet slipping off its perch and ending up in your front room. They were still clinging to that, according to the Daily Skeptic, alas. Even that old standby is looking shaky, with evidence gathering that the ice is no longer melting as fast as the recent past. On August the 16th, summer sea ice in the Arctic was at its third highest extent since 2007. Now, last year there was a shortage of something or other, and that was attributed to the fact that the northern route, the sea route, had closed up with ice 2 weeks or a month before it was supposed to have closed up. So the ships were stuck there and they were waiting for a Russian icebreaker to free them so they could continue. And that was last year. So suddenly now we're talking about the fact that the Arctic sea ice isn't in the trouble it was supposed to be. According to the US-based National Snow and Ice Data Center, never mind. The northern sea route along Eurasia may not become ice-free this year for the first time since 2007. That's the top area there that I was talking about. Preliminary estimates by, I'm not going to say it, suggest a 30% chance that sea ice will cover 5 million square kilometres, something that has not happened for 8 years. So, now people are starting to talk about the fact that weather doesn't stay the same all the time, that it goes up and down, that it's cyclical, and that we shouldn't worry when there are blips in the readings. Right, and the cooling trend has been apparent for some time. Earlier this year, the Daily Skeptic reported that the coverage of Arctic sea ice was now very close to the 1991-2020 average, well above the 2012 point and higher in 2020 and higher in 2021 than the previous year. So, and yeah, even Europe's in on the act. According to Copernicus, the EU's weather service, the 2021 March sea ice extent was just 3% below the 30-year average. All right, so I'm not going to read the whole thing, but next time some snooty student tells you that we're going to burn up in 2 years' time, you just point them at this sort of thing. However, there won't be too much of that, because suddenly we need the fossil fuels more than we did before, and suddenly all of the figures are going to be changing throughout, from governments to organs like the BBC. Just watch this space. All right, well, I'm Granniopteryx. I'm on YouTube, Rumble, BitChute and Minds. I also am on social media, Twitter, Gab and Parler, as @Granniopteryx. I always let you know when I've uploaded a video on Twitter, Gab or Parler, or all three actually. And if you subscribe to one of those, you'll get notifications, which if you're watching this on YouTube, you probably won't get. Please help my channel grow by liking this, sharing this and subscribing. If you think you're subscribed, check it out, because YouTube is careless about that too. Also, you can help me financially, buy me a coffee, one or two of the other links down in the description. And also, you know, I do sell some merch. Unfortunately, my website's down at the moment, but if you email me with an order, I'll get it fulfilled. You'll be paying with PayPal, as you would be if you went to the website anyway. Right, I think I've got everything. Okay, till next time. Why not treat yourself or a favoured relative or friend to these magnificent examples of merch? The mugs and t-shirts come in the Granniopteryx design or Granbo. with a firearm or the more deadly knitting needles. Go to www.granniopteryx.com and whatever platform you're watching this on, please click like, subscribe and share, share, share.